I recently started running, and one thing I've discovered is that my hamstrings and my calves have been getting super tight. And this is no good for my handstand practice. I'm having to stretch for a long time before I'm comfortable kicking up to handstand. And so I'm kind of wondering, are handstands and running incompatible? To answer this question, I brought on my good friend Sarah Scozzaro, ultra runner, amazing woman, amazing mover, and here she is to tell us what we can do to run and do handstands. Today I have Sarah Scozzaro on my YouTube channel. I met Sarah at the Women's Movement Collaborative when we were both presenting. So Sarah was there talking about her experience as an ultra runner. So think like 100K races in the mountains, like crazy stuff. And Sarah's talk was incredible and inspiring, but what really blew me away about Sarah was how she moves. She can flow gracefully, she was able to kick up to handstand smoothly, and she can hip hop like a pro. Yeah. So I really wanted to bring Sarah on the call today. So thank you, Sarah, for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
So I've never been a runner. And recently, during this COVID-19 pandemic, where everyone all around the world is in some level of lockdown, I've found that running has given me a real sense of freedom. And so I've started running almost daily, probably only about 5K right now. But it's been really fantastic for me. The downside, however, has been that I've noticed my hamstrings are tight and my calves feel as if someone has scrunched them up in a ball and super glued them together. So when I try and practice handstands, I end up having to do a lot of stretching before I get started. And I know a lot of my students do both running and handstands. And so I'm wondering, are these two things, are they incompatible? Do I just need to do a lot of stretching, or there's some other strategies that I need to take advantage of that I'm not doing? And as someone who runs a lot more than I do and moves really well, Sarah, what are your secrets? What are your secrets?
My secrets. So I know handstands and hand balancing are not incompatible with running. So everybody can take a deep sigh of relief right there. Or maybe some people aren't. Maybe some people aren't. I think and this is a generalization, but what tends to happen is, especially if people are really going through a phase where they're working on more of their hand balancing and handstands, they're working a lot on, you're very good about teaching mobility in the hands and the shoulders and strength in the upper arms and forearms. You kind of have to look at your feet and your legs the same way. Yeah, I know. So some people don't necessarily do that. And so it's really about strengthening, you're saying it's your hamstrings and your calves, but generally that starts foundationally from the feet, and it can also come from the glutes and the hips. So I generally recommend really working on those little intrinsic muscles in the feet, kind of getting the feet happy, being able to lift and lower your toes, right, which is a lot harder than it sounds. And stretching the calves. I've got some great stretches that I'll be sharing with you for calves, as well as some of top of the foot stretching. So you kind of have that balance of the tight calves. We need to balance out with the tight anterior muscles of the lower limbs, and as well as some hip and hamstring work.
Okay. So is this stuff I should be doing before I run, after I run, or does it not really matter when I do it?
Generally, it doesn't really matter. It's not like a dynamic mobility protocol, something you would do as like a warm-up. It's more of gaining mobility and kind of innervating those little muscles in the feet on a day-to-day basis, so that your body, you're not going from having your feet in shoes all the time and really stiff feet. Generally, people that are getting into gymnastics and hand balancing and things like that tend to be good about wearing like minimal footwear and being barefoot. But the challenge with that is sometimes people go from not running much at all to suddenly going out and running, and they're wearing a more minimal shoe, which is, kind of what they do day to day. Is that you? So what happens is if you haven't been stretching and lengthening the tissues like of the calves, you're in that zero drop shoe and trying to run. And a lot of people then go, I'm going to run midfoot because that's what we're supposed to do because we're not supposed to heel strike. It's causing a lot of unnecessary kind of pull on those calves.
Here's the standing calf stretch. I'm going to demonstrate with both a half dome and a rolled yoga mat. Go ahead and place the ball of your foot at the apex or top part of the half dome, keeping both your pelvis in neutral and your ribs down. Slowly inch the opposite foot forward while you're able to maintain that neutral position. I'm going to demonstrate for you what happens if you move that foot too far forward. You're going to not only anteriorly tilt at the pelvis, you're going to thrust those ribs. That's not what we want. Back that foot up until you can maintain that neutral position, ribs down. You're going to hold this for about 60 to 90 seconds. If you don't have a half dome, you can do the same thing, but just grab a rolled yoga mat, again, placing the ball of the foot at the apex, moving the other foot forward, and grabbing your kitty for extra resistance. Here we have the top of the foot stretch. Keeping your ribs down and your pelvis in neutral, reach one of your feet behind you, aiming to get as much contact with the top of the foot as possible. In most cases in the beginning, this is basically going to be your toes. If you need a deeper stretch and you can maintain ribs down and neutral pelvis, reach your foot further behind you. You're going to have a nice stretch and a bit of tension on the top of that foot. We're going to work on lifting and lowering our toes, which is essential for not only foot health, but also knee and hip health as well. Go ahead and stand in a neutral position with feet hip width apart and practice to start lifting and lowering your big toe separate from your other 4 digits and vice versa. This can take a little bit of practice, so don't get frustrated, and really work on driving the big toe up and relaxing the other toes.
And then what about the kind of, you said hips and glutes, like what should we be doing? Is that a mobility thing or strengthening thing we should be doing with the?
Yeah, so it's kind of a mobility, strengthening, and stretching. It's kind of a trifecta, depending on the person. So running, and I don't know what you see when you work with handstands and when people come to your workshops. How are people's general hip extension when you see people? How are they pretty good at hip extension, or do they have any issues? Like, what do you generally see?
There's a general lack of hip extension in most people.
And that's a big problem with running.
Yeah. I mean, except like when hand balancing, you get the kind of hypermobile population as well. And they're different beasts.
Yeah, you got like the bell curve, right? You got the people on the one end. But as a general population, I think it's just kind of our day-to-day life. A lot of people don't have as much hip extension as they need, and hip extension is essential for being able to get healthy recruitment in your running. So if you're not being able to fully extend at the hip, generally your hamstrings are going to try to take over, or you're going to have some low back issues. Right. So working on that hip mobility and being able to get that healthy range of motion in your hip extension and stretching your hamstrings, right, and then kind of getting the glutes to go, to fire off. So really getting your glutes.
Perfect. So you do the exercises before running. What about the stretching of the hip flexors and the hamstrings? Is that something you can do again anytime, or would you recommend doing that before the running?
I would recommend actually doing that more when you're warm, a little bit warm. Yeah. Okay. I mean, it can be a pre-run. If you've, say, done some other mobility work, you can do a little, but generally it's a good thing to do after your run as far as like a pure stretch. So It's a really good, when you've been out running and you've been, flexing, extending, then get into a nice psoas lunge and really stretch and open up that hip for hip extension. Get on the ground and do a strap stretch for the hamstring. And kind of, we could do 3 different segments with that, kind of perpendicular to the ground, open across the body, and then open, to the opposite wall, which I'll show you in a video. And those kind of get some nice opening in that hip as well. You can do them other days, doesn't have to be just after your run, but as far as having the muscles kind of ready to go, generally don't do them right before a run.
Here we've got the runner's lunge. In a half kneeling position, keeping the ribs down and the pelvis in neutral, you're going to go ahead and open up and push the entire torso forward very gently, not leaning from the hips. Extend the arm of the leg that's bent on the ground up for an even deeper stretch along that side. If you need to deepen the stretch even further, reach behind you and grab the foot of the leg that was on the ground. Again, keeping your ribs down and your pelvis in neutral, extend the other arm forward as you really open up into those hips and feel that stretch. Remember to keep breathing deeply and press that body forward to lengthen that hip flexor region and really open up the hips. Here's a version of that runner's lunge, but a banded and also a front view. Go ahead and place a band that's been looped around a sturdy surface around your hip. And coming into that runner's lunge that we played with before, rock that torso forward as you engage the glute and stretch out that hip flexor. I like to then rainbow my foot lower limb out, as you can see here, to get a different angle before bringing it back to the regular position. Then extend your arm up, and as you push forward, extend forward and getting that nice stretch along that lateral line. This one is a great progression on the typical runner's lunge that you'll normally see. This is the strap stretch. Go ahead and loop a yoga strap or a similar item behind the ball of the foot, bringing that leg up into the air. Maintain contact with your hamstrings and your shoulders with the ground at all times. After you've held that leg up for about 60 seconds, you're going to bring it across the body, tilting that foot towards the ground, getting a delightful stretch through the peroneals and into the hip. Hold here for about 60 seconds. Next, you're going to take your leg and being supported by the strap, you're going to open it up to the opposite wall. Key here is do not allow the opposite hip or glute to lift off the ground. So both glutes should maintain contact with the ground throughout the stretch, especially in this position, and keep those shoulders down. Now it's time to switch legs. We've got 2 exercises here to work on external and internal rotation of those hips. Go ahead and lay on your back with a yoga block between your knees and hips at 90 degrees. A thick rolled towel can be used in the place of a yoga block here as needed. Maintain contact with your low back on the floor at all times. Applying gentle pressure on that block. Bring the feet away from each other, giving that block a nice squeeze. You're going to feel a deep rotation and stretch, sometimes even a cramp in those hips. The goal is to work up to 60 seconds, but take your time getting there. Once we've done that, you're going to bring your legs up, your hands under those glutes and hips, and by rotating at the femur, you're going to, just like a Pez dispenser, take that block and push it forward and back. This is all being generated from rotation at the hip.
So my last question on this topic is, how often would you recommend doing all this stuff? The footwork, the calf stretching, the hip stretching, the hamstring stretching, and the kind of glute work?
Yeah. I have a cat that just walked in the room, by the way. So I know you can appreciate that. He's probably going to start howling.
I think mine are locked in the basement. Right?
I should have locked mine in the basement because this is a howler. So how often do I recommend doing those? I recommend, that's ideally you would be doing something daily.
Right.
Because the amount of time that we aren't in positions or we aren't doing things to strengthen or stretch those areas far outweigh the 5 or 10 minutes 3 times a week you'll be doing it. Okay. So ideally, but daily. I know realistically for some people, it's I have to work, I have a family, I want to work on my handstands, I want to get my run in. I get a lot of athletes that say, but I just want to run. And I like to remind them that sometimes taking that extra 5 to 10 minutes, even every other day, is going to, in the long term, buy you more time to do the things that you want to do, such as running. It's going to increase your longevity of being a healthier, happier runner. Because I'm sure with what you're experiencing, you're enjoying the freedom of running, but you probably don't love the tightness that you're having in your calves, right?
No.
It's frustrating because you're like, how am I ever going to be able to run further than 5K?
Yeah.
I don't want to if this is how I feel. So just some simple strategies of kind of targeting the areas that tend to take a lot of the brunt from running can really make a big difference.
That's fantastic. I'm super excited to try this, and I'll let you know. I'll let you know how it goes. Hopefully I'll be running 10K soon.
Awesome. I can't wait. And I expect videos with cats assisting.
Okay. The cat assisted run. Yeah.
Oh no, the cat assisted stretch.
Okay, that's easier.
Don't use the cat for the calf stretch. Although I did use a large rounded object, which one of my cats would qualify for that.
Yeah, no, I've got one of those. Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. That is so much fantastic information there. And I'm sure that's going to really help a ton of people who want to combine their running and their hand balancing work and are just, as with me, kind of feeling that extra tightness that they've been getting from the running. So that's going to help a lot of people. Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome. I sure hope so. It's been great.
I just want to finish by thanking Sarah so much for sharing those exercises with us and giving us some tips so that we can continue to do our handstand practice, but also introduce a little bit of running into the mix as well. So if you want to find out more about Sarah, check out the links below. Sarah's Instagram, Dirty Runner, amazing content on there. And yeah, check out everything below. And thanks again, Sarah. Thank you for watching.